The dust swirled red against the setting sun, each gust a reminder of what was lost. He stared at the handful of seeds in his palm, enough to replant only a fraction of his fields, and certainly not enough to feed an alien colony on the brink of starvation. But Michael knew it was a start. The grit stung his eyes, the taste of dry earth coating his tongue. Cracked soil stretched to the horizon, a testament to the galactic drought that had choked the life from this planet. He ran a calloused thumb over the small, brown seeds, each one a tiny vessel of hope, a connection to a past when Earth had been a garden. A message had arrived on his comms a week ago. A desperate plea from the Voxari, a species he'd only seen in history vids, their homeworld ravaged by famine. These seeds, they claimed, were Earth's last viable stock. The ground trembled. Michael shielded his eyes, peering through the swirling red. A ship descended from the bruised twilight sky, its sleek, alien design a stark contrast to the rusted machinery and withered crops of his farm. It settled onto the parched earth with a hiss of displaced air, the Voxari insignia gleaming dully in the fading light. A ramp extended and a figure emerged. She was tall, even for a Voxari, her skin a deep indigo. One leg was metallic, a polished prosthetic glinting in the dim light. Her expression was tight, her eyes narrowed with a mixture of desperation and suspicion. Michael Young. Her voice was a low, resonant hum. "That's me," Michael replied, his voice raspy from the dust. He stepped forward, offering a hand. "Welcome to what's left of Earth." She didn't take his hand. "I am Juno, a scientist and council member of the Voxari colony. I understand you possess seeds." Her tone was clipped, wary. Michael nodded, opening his palm to reveal the seeds. "These. I heard about the famine, figured you could use them more than I can." Juno's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Humans are not known for such. Altruism, what is your price?" Michael sighed. "Look, lady, I get it. Earth's got a reputation, but my farm's dying. My daughter's got college bills. I know what it's like to be up against it. Besides," he added, a flicker of his past life in his eyes, "I've seen enough people starve to last me a lifetime." He didn't elaborate, but the set of his jaw hinted at a history she couldn't know. Juno's gaze softened slightly, but her skepticism remained. "Our soil is unreceptive. It lacks the necessary nutrients for Terran crops. We've tried before, failed before." "I'm a farmer, Juno," Michael said, his voice firm. "I know soil. I know how to make things grow even where they shouldn't. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to try." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Very well. We will conduct a trial, but be warned, farmer, failure will not be tolerated, and distrust runs deep within my colony. Many remember the exploitations of your kind." The scene shifted, a brief glimpse into a dimly lit chamber. Voxari council members, their faces etched with worry, debated in hushed tones. "Accepting help from humans, it is a dangerous gamble," one said, his voice filled with concern. "They took our resources once. What is to stop them from doing it again?" Another argued, "But what choice do we have? Our people are dying." Juno stood firm, her metallic leg a silent testament to the colony's hardships. "We must explore every option, even if it means facing our fears." Back on Michael's farm, Juno turned back towards the ship, her shoulders squared. "Prepare the seeds for transport," she instructed, her voice echoing across the desolate landscape. She glanced back at Michael, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes, but it was quickly masked by a familiar dread. The fate of her people, she knew, rested on these tiny seeds and the unpredictable nature of a human farmer. The ship shuddered as it pierced the ochre atmosphere, and then the viewscreen swam with the desolate landscape of Voxar. Red dust devils danced across cracked plains, skeletal structures clawed at the horizon, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of decay. It wasn't merely barren, it was broken. Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He'd seen drought before, dust bowls that swallowed farms whole. This was beyond. As the ramp lowered, The dry, rasping cough of the wind carried with it the faint cries of the starving. The Voxari who shuffled forward to greet them were gaunt, their iridescent skin dulled, their large eyes sunken in their skulls. Ribs showed starkly beneath thin tunics. A child, no older than 5, reached a skeletal hand toward Michael, whimpering a word he didn't understand but felt in his bones: hunger. Juno placed a hand on Michael's arm, her expression grim. "Welcome to Voxar, Michael. I wish you could have seen it before." They were led through the skeletal remains of what had once been a bustling city. Now only husks remained. He saw a group of elders huddled around a sputtering nutrient dispenser, their faces etched with despair as they watched it grind to a halt. Another group was sifting through refuse, desperately searching for scraps. The air thrummed with a low, constant hum of suffering. Juno led Michael to a monolithic structure that somehow still stood defiant against the ravaged landscape: the Central Council. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. A dozen Voxari, their faces grim and etched with worry, sat around a circular table. Their prosthetic limbs, more common here than he'd imagined, gleamed dully in the dim light. One, a male with a particularly ornate cybernetic arm, glared at Michael. "So, the human arrives, bearing gifts, no doubt with a price we cannot afford." Another, a female with deep lines around her eyes, spoke with weary resignation. "We have dealt with humans before, promises whispered on the wind, followed by empty holds and broken treaties. Why should we believe this one is any different?" Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to exploit you. I'm a farmer. I know what it's like to watch your crops wither and your land die. I have seeds, earth seeds, that might be able to help you. I'm willing to share them." "Share?" The male council member scoffed. "Humans share nothing without expecting tenfold in return. What is your price, human?" Juno raised a hand, silencing the council. "He asks for nothing but a chance to prove himself. He understands the risks, the challenges. We have little to lose." She turned to Michael, her violet eyes intense. "But understand this, Michael Young. Our people are desperate and their hope is a fragile thing. Do not break it with empty promises." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, the female council member sighed. "Very well, we will grant you a small plot of land. A proving ground. But know this, human, if your seeds fail, you will be held accountable." Juno led Michael out of the council chambers and towards the outskirts of the city. The designated plot was a desolate patch of red, cracked earth, devoid of any vegetation. A rusted irrigation system lay in pieces nearby, a testament to past failures. "This is it," Juno said, her voice flat. "The graveyard of hope. Many have tried to coax life from this soil, all have failed." Michael knelt, sifting the dust through his fingers. It was gritty, almost metallic, and devoid of the rich, loamy scent of earth soil. "What's the composition?" "High in xantrium and low in nitrogen," Juno replied, rattling off a list of complex compounds. "The atmospheric pressure and radiation levels are also significantly different from Earth. Earth crops simply cannot thrive here. We've tried everything." Michael ran his hand over the dry earth, his gaze distant. He was thinking. Flashback. The sun beat down mercilessly on Michael's farm. The creek, usually a gurgling artery of life, was now a dry scar. His crops were stunted, their leaves withered and brown. He stood in the middle of a barren field, sweat plastering his shirt to his back, and stared at the sky, searching for any sign of rain. His daughter, Sarah, approached him, her face etched with worry. "Dad, we're running out of water. The well's almost dry." Michael knelt, examining a withered corn stalk. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. He had to find a way. His gaze fell upon the dew collector he had rigged up, a series of tarps and collection basins designed to capture the morning condensation. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Sarah," he said, a glimmer of grit in his eyes, "we're going to try something different." He spent the next few days diverting every drop of water he could find, channeling it into a network of underground pipes that he had painstakingly laid out. He used a combination of clay pots and porous rocks to create a slow-release irrigation system that delivered water directly to the roots of his plants. He even experimented with different types of mulch to conserve moisture and protect the soil from the scorching sun. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all he had. Back on Voxar, Michael stood up, a newfound grit in his eyes. We need to analyze this soil, find out exactly what it's missing, and then we need to figure out how to get it. He began collecting samples, carefully placing them in sterile containers. Local Voxari farmers watched him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. As Michael and Juno began to till the soil, breaking up the hard, compacted earth, one of the farmers, a grizzled veteran with a cybernetic leg, approached them, his face etched with disapproval. "You're wasting your time, human," he said, his voice raspy. "This land is cursed, nothing grows here." Michael stopped tilling and looked at the farmer, his expression calm but firm. "Maybe, but I'm not giving up without a fight." He planted the first seeds, carefully placing them in the prepared soil. As he covered them with earth, he felt a surge of hope mixed with a deep sense of anxiety. He knew the odds were stacked against him, but he also knew that he had to try. Days turned into weeks and the seeds showed little signs of growth. The red earth remained stubbornly barren. Distrust grew within the colony, festering like a wound. One afternoon, as Michael was inspecting the parched soil, the grizzled farmer confronted him again, his voice imbued with anger. "You promised us hope, human, you promised us food, but all you've given us is more empty promises and wasted resources." Juno stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "He is trying. He is doing everything he can. We must be patient." "Patient?" The farmer spat. "We are starving. We don't have time for patience." That night, under the crimson glow of Voxar's twin moons, a figure crept through the fields. A small device hummed in their hand, emitting a high-frequency pulse that disrupted the fragile irrigation system, diverting the precious water away from Michael's plot. Michael discovered the sabotage the next morning. The soil was bone dry, the seedlings withered and lifeless. He stared at the ruined irrigation system, his heart sinking. This wasn't just about the soil or the seeds. This was about something far more insidious. He was facing an enemy he hadn't anticipated, one that was determined to see him fail. The Voxari sun beat down, baking the parched earth. Michael knelt beside a section of the irrigation line, his fingers tracing a jagged cut in the plasteel. "Sabotage," he muttered, the word tasting like dust in his mouth. Juno, her brow furrowed, examined another break further down the line. The dull metallic gleam of her prosthetic limb caught the sunlight as she moved. More than one, systematically damaged. She rose, her voice tight with frustration. "I should have known better than to trust a human solution. This is why we rely on our own ways." Michael stood, wiping sweat from his brow with a dirt-stained hand. "Easy, Juno. Getting angry won't fix it. We need to repair this, and fast." He scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing. "Problem is, I don't see a whole lot of hardware supply stores around here." He started walking, his gaze sweeping the landscape. Twisted metal scraps littered the area, remnants of a long-abandoned Voxari mining operation. "Anything is fixable, Juno, you just need the parts and the know-how." He began to scavenge, his hands sifting through the debris with practiced ease. He spotted a length of corrugated metal, ripped from a derelict building. Might be able to use this. Juno watched him, her expression a mixture of skepticism and grudging curiosity. Her tone was infused with doubt. "What do you know about fixing things? You are a farmer." Michael grunted, wrestling the metal free from the wreckage. "I've been fixing things my whole life. Wouldn't have survived this long otherwise." A flicker of memory crossed his face, a brief, involuntary grimace. Flashback, the harsh glare of twin suns reflecting off sand-blasted metal. A younger Michael, face smeared with grease, cursed as he tightened a bolt on a sputtering engine. Around him, the skeletal remains of armored vehicles baked in Thesson, Earthsun. A sergeant barked orders, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Young, get that damn transport running. We're not waiting for reinforcements." He shook off the memory, the heat of the Voxari sun, a pale imitation of that long-ago furnace. "Back then, we didn't get supply drops every Tuesday. You used what you had or you died. Lessons I never forgot." He turned back to Juno, his eyes steady. "This isn't so different." Juno watched him work, her initial skepticism slowly eroding. She saw the sure, practiced movements of his hands, the way he assessed the damage and planned his repairs. Perhaps I was too quick to judge," she admitted, her voice softening. For hours they worked side by side, the rhythmic clang of metal against metal filling the air. Michael used a combination of salvaged parts, jury-rigged tools, and sheer ingenuity to patch the irrigation line. Juno, initially hesitant, began to assist, her scientific knowledge complementing Michael's practical skills. Finally, they stood back, the repaired sections gleaming dully in the sunlight. Michael activated the pump. A low hum filled the air, but no water flowed. He frowned. Something still blocked. They followed the line, tracing it back to the main pipe. There they found it, a dense, tangled mass of roots and plant matter deliberately crammed into the opening. Juno examined the obstruction, her expression grim. "Vaxel weed. Its roots grow quickly and are very strong. Someone knew what they were doing." Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "Damn it, so how do we get rid of it?" "Usually we use specialized solvents," Juno replied, "but we have little to none, and what we have is being rationed." Michael stared at the blockage, his mind racing. Then a spark of inspiration ignited in his eyes. "Fire," he said, his voice decisive. "We burn it out." Juno recoiled, her eyes widening in alarm. "Fire? Are you insane? We'll destroy the entire system." "Not if we control it," Michael countered. "A controlled burn, we dig a fire break, keep it contained. The heat will kill the roots and clear the pipe." Juno hesitated, her brow furrowed with concern. "It's too risky, Michael. Too much could go wrong. And what's the alternative?" Michael asked, his voice firm. "Let the crops die, we have to try." He saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear of failure. "Trust me, Juno, I know what I'm doing." After a tense moment, Juno relented. "Very well," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But if this fails?" Together, they prepared the fire break, digging a wide trench around the affected area. Michael carefully gathered dry brush and tinder, arranging it around the base of the pipe. He lit the tinder, and a small flame flickered to life. The fire grew quickly, fueled by the dry plant matter. Smoke billowed into the air, acrid and stinging. Juno watched, her face etched with anxiety, her hand hovering near a portable fire extinguisher. Michael, his face grim, monitored the flames, using a long branch to control their spread. The heat intensified, radiating outwards in waves. The air crackled with energy. Then, with a whoosh, the blockage ignited. The flames roared, consuming the Vaxel weed in a furious inferno. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the entire system would go up in smoke. But Michael held steady, his eyes fixed on the flames, his movements precise and controlled. Slowly, the fire began to die down, the smoke clearing to reveal a charred, empty pipe. He nodded to Juno, and she cautiously activated the pump. This time, water gurgled to life, flowing freely through the repaired system. A collective sigh of relief escaped their lips. They had done it. Days later, tiny green sprouts emerged from the soil, a testament to their hard work and perseverance. Michael knelt, gently touching a delicate leaf. "Life finds a way," he murmured, a smile playing on his lips. Juno joined him, her eyes scanning the field, her expression thoughtful. "We should take new soil samples, see what nutrients are there and what are missing." Michael agreed, and they began gathering the samples. The analysis revealed a deficiency in key nutrients. Michael had an idea and suggested that they use composted waste from the colony, but Juno was hesitant due to the potential for disease. After a long discussion, Juno finally conceded that it was worth the risk. Together, they developed a plan to collect and process the waste into compost, working to ensure that it was safe and effective. Meanwhile, hidden in the shadows, a figure watched them, their face obscured by a hooded cloak. They clenched their fist, their eyes burning with resentment. Juno's worries were valid, and the rival faction was brewing more sabotage to undermine Michael's efforts. Juno turned to Michael, a flicker of worry in her eyes. "I can't help but feel like we are being watched, like we are walking on thin ice." Michael and Juno began collecting organic waste from across the colony, a grim parade of refuse. What the Voxari considered refuse anyway. Michael wrinkled his nose at a viscous, violet sludge being poured into a reinforced container by a wiry Voxari worker. It smelled faintly of ammonia and something akin to overripe fruit, a combination that made his stomach churn. "What is that?" he asked Juno, gesturing to the sludge. "Excrement from the larva farms," she explained, her voice neutral. "High in nitrates, excellent for compost in theory." The theory part worried him. Earth compost was straightforward, browns and greens, carbon and nitrogen. This was an alien chemistry experiment waiting to happen. They also collected discarded husks from the protein synthesis vats, fibrous and surprisingly light, and the leathery remains of the nutrient paste wrappers, which smelled vaguely of burnt sugar. Challenges arose almost immediately. The protein husks, instead of breaking down, seemed to expand when wet, forming a dense, suffocating mat. The nutrient paste wrappers attracted swarms of buzzing insects with iridescent wings and the larval excrement. Well, the larval excrement started to bubble ominously after a few hours, releasing a gas that stung the eyes. Juno, however, was in her element. She donned a pair of thick protective goggles and, using a device that resembled a sonic screwdriver, began analyzing the bubbling sludge. "The pH is off the charts," she announced, her voice muffled by her respirator. "And there's an unexpected interaction with the atmospheric methane it's creating. Hydroxylamine, toxic." Michael watched, impressed despite himself. "So, what do we do?" "We need to neutralize the alkalinity," Juno said, scribbling notes on a datapad with her good hand while her prosthetic whirred softly. "And find a way to bind the excess methane, perhaps a carbon-rich additive." Michael thought of the dried leaves he used back on Earth. "What about those fibrous plants you use for textiles, the ones that grow along the canals?" Juno's eyes widened. "The xylose weed. It's incredibly absorbent and readily available. It could work." Working together, they shredded the xylose weed and mixed it into the bubbling sludge. The reaction was immediate. The bubbling subsided, the pungent odor lessened, and the mixture began to resemble something vaguely compost-like. Michael adapted his earth-based composting techniques, building a series of layered piles, carefully balancing the alien browns and greens, and ensuring proper aeration. He missed the familiar smell of decaying leaves and rich soil, but he pressed on, driven by the image of the starving Voxari children he'd seen earlier that day. After days of backbreaking work, the first batch of compost was ready. It was a dark, crumbly substance, but its effectiveness was uncertain. They created a small testing bed, planting a row of earth seeds alongside a row of native Voxari crops, carefully monitoring their growth. A week later, Juno approached Michael, her expression grim. "Something's wrong," she said, pointing to the test bed. The Voxari crops were thriving, but the earth seedlings were stunted and yellowing. He knelt down, examining the soil. The texture seemed off, almost greasy. Then Juno noticed something else. Some of the native crops nearest the irrigation system had begun to wither, their leaves curling and turning brown. "The water," she said, her voice tight. "Check the water." They collected a sample of the irrigation water and tested it. The results were alarming. The water contained a high concentration of a toxic compound, something that shouldn't have been there. "Someone tampered with the compost mixture," Michael said, his mind focused. "They added something that's leaching into the water supply." Juno ran another analysis. It's a byproduct of the Krillin refining process, she said, her voice barely a whisper. A neurotoxin. In high concentrations, it can cause widespread crop failure. The implications were devastating. The Krillin refinery was a major industrial complex, employing hundreds of Voxari. Access to the toxin wouldn't be widespread, but it narrowed down the list of suspects considerably. Michael, suspecting sabotage, began to set up a security perimeter around the fields. He scavenged discarded metal sheeting, lengths of wire, and scraps of sensor equipment from the colony's junk heaps. Juno watched him, her brow furrowed. "What are you doing?" she asked. "This is a farm, Michael, not a fortress." "Preventative measures," he said, his voice clipped. "Someone wants to see us fail, and I'm not going to let them. But this will frighten people," Juno protested. "It will make them think we don't trust them." Michael stopped and looked at her, his eyes hard. "I don't trust them," he said bluntly. "Not all of them, anyway." He saw the hurt in her eyes, the flicker of betrayal. He softened his tone. "Look, I've seen this before. Back on Earth, I served in the military. We were building a school in a war-torn region, trying to win over the locals. We thought we were making progress, but then, one night, someone set fire to the whole damn thing, burned it to the ground, killed 2 of my friends. Sabotage is real, Juno. You have to be prepared." He didn't elaborate on the specifics of that night, the acrid smell of burning wood, the screams, the feeling of utter helplessness. He pushed the memories down, focusing on the task at hand. He set up a perimeter using simple, low-tech security measures. Tripwires connected to empty ration cans that would rattle in the wind, motion sensors salvaged from broken mining equipment that would trigger a flickering light, and strategically placed sheets of metal that would amplify any approaching footsteps. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The rival faction, frustrated by Michael's precautions, decided to launch a direct attack. Under the cover of darkness, they crept towards the compost pile, carrying containers filled with the Krillin toxin. They reached the pile undetected, quickly dousing it with the poison. Then, one of them produced a crude detonator. The explosion ripped through the compost pile with a deafening roar, scattering the toxic mixture across the fields. The ground shook and a cloud of noxious smoke billowed into the air. Michael and Juno arrived on the scene moments later, drawn by the sound of the explosion. The compost pile was a smoldering ruin, and a thick layer of toxic residue coated the surrounding crops. Juno stared at the devastation, her face pale. "It's all gone," she whispered, her voice filled with despair. "Everything. Ruined." She turned away, clutching her prosthetic arm, the whirring mechanism now sounding like a mournful lament. Michael, however, surveyed the scene with dogged grit. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the perimeter. He knelt down, examining the ground near the blast site. "Footprints," he said, his voice low. "Leading away from the pile. They didn't get far." Juno turned back, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the fire. The footprints were small but distinct in the crimson dust, leading away from the trampled section of the field. Michael knelt, running a calloused finger along the edge of one print. They hadn't bothered to cover their tracks, a sign of either arrogance or desperation. He rose, the low twin suns casting long shadows across the fields. They didn't go far. Juno's expression was grim. "This is unexpected." She gestured to the Voxari guards, their chitinous armor glinting in the fading light. "Secure the perimeter. No one leaves." Michael followed the tracks at a brisk pace, his senses on high alert. The prints led towards a cluster of rock formations, a natural maze that offered ample cover. He moved with a practiced ease, his body remembering the drills and patrols of his youth. He gripped the repurposed plasma rifle tighter, not wanting to use it but ready if necessary. The tracks ended abruptly at the entrance to a small, hidden settlement nestled within the rocks. It was little more than a handful of dwellings built into the natural alcoves, smoke curling lazily from a central fire pit. Voices, hushed and anxious, drifted on the wind. Michael signaled to the guards to hold back, then stepped into the settlement alone. All conversation ceased. 6 pairs of Voxari eyes, wide with fear and defiance, turned to him. One, an elder with intricate bone carvings adorning their carapace, stepped forward. "You have trespassed, human," the elder rasped, their voice trembling slightly. "The seeds," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "The sabotage, I know it was you." Denials flickered across their faces, but their body language betrayed them. Michael had seen enough guilt in his life to recognize it. He raised his hands, palms open. "I don't want to hurt anyone, just tell me why." One of the younger Voxari lunged, a crude, sharpened tool in their hand. Michael sidestepped the attack with practiced ease, disarming them with a swift movement. He pinned them to the ground, his grip firm but not crushing. The others tensed, ready to attack, but froze as Juno's voice cut through the air. "Stand down." Juno strode into the settlement, her prosthetic limb clicking softly on the stone. Her expression was a mask of disbelief and anger. "Elder Thuron, what is the meaning of this?" Thuron bowed their head, shame etched into their features. We did what we thought was necessary, Counselor Juno." "Necessary? You sabotaged the crops, you condemned our people to starvation." Juno's voice rose, her anger palpable. "We only sought to protect what is ours," Thuron replied, their voice barely a whisper. "These earth crops, they are not natural. They will poison our soil, change us forever. We have seen it happen on other worlds. Humans come, they offer gifts, and then they take everything." Michael released the young Voxari, stepping back. "That's not what I'm here to do. How can we believe you?" Another Voxari spat, their eyes filled with resentment. "Your kind has always exploited us." Juno turned to Michael, her expression conflicted. "They speak of the soil wars, human. A time when Earth corporations stripped entire planets of their resources, leaving them barren and lifeless. The scars run deep." "I know," Michael said softly, "but I'm not them, I'm just a farmer trying to help." He looked at Thuron, his gaze steady. "I understand your fear, but you're wrong. These seeds aren't a weapon. They're a lifeline, and I'm not going to let them be destroyed." Juno turned back to the sabotaged field. The damage was extensive. The alien toxin had already begun to discolor the soil, turning it a sickly gray. "How much is ruined?" "Too much," Michael said, kneeling to examine the soil. "But maybe not all. We need to neutralize the toxin fast." Juno closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in thought. "There is a way." A compound derived from a rare mineral, xantrium. It bonds with the toxin, rendering it inert. But xantrium is only found in the Razor Peaks, a region known for its volatile storms and aggressive fauna. "Then we go to the Razor Peaks," Michael said, his voice resolute. "It's too dangerous," Juno protested. "I can't ask you to risk your life for this." "You didn't ask," Michael said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Besides, I've faced worse than a few storms and angry animals." He looked at the assembled Voxari. "We'll need a team, volunteers." Several Voxari stepped forward, their faces determined. Even Thuron, his shame evident, offered his assistance. The journey to the Razor Peaks was arduous. The landscape was a jagged wasteland of obsidian peaks and windswept canyons. The air crackled with static electricity, and the ground vibrated with the rumble of distant storms. Michael used his knowledge of survival techniques to guide the team through the treacherous terrain. He showed them how to read the wind patterns, identify edible plants, and find shelter from the storms. One evening, as a particularly violent electrical storm raged around them, Michael constructed a makeshift shelter using only the materials they could find, woven branches reinforced with mud and rock. The Voxari watched in amazement as he worked, their initial skepticism slowly fading. "Impressive," Juno said, watching Michael secure the last branch. "You learn quickly." "Had to," Michael replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Didn't have much choice back then." Inside the shelter, huddled around a small fire, Juno studied Michael. "You've seen combat, haven't you?" Michael hesitated, his gaze flickering towards the flames. A long time ago, a different life. It never really leaves you, does it? Juno said softly, her voice filled with a strange mixture of pity and understanding. The ghosts always linger. Michael nodded, unable to meet her gaze. He didn't want to talk about it, about the things he had seen, the things he had done. He just wanted to forget. After days of relentless travel, the team finally reached the Xantrium deposit. It was a vein of shimmering, purple crystal embedded in the side of a cliff face. Securing it was difficult, requiring careful excavation and a steady hand, but they managed to extract enough of the mineral to create the neutralizer. Back at the colony, Juno worked tirelessly in her makeshift laboratory, refining the Xantrium and synthesizing the antidote. Finally, after hours of painstaking work, she held up a vial of shimmering blue liquid. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The neutralizer. The antidote was applied to the contaminated fields, and the results were immediate. The sickly gray hue began to fade, replaced by the rich, red color of the Voxari soil. But the damage was done. Many of the crops were lost, withered and lifeless. Despite the partial success, Juno was concerned. The toxin. It may have long-term effects on the soil. We need to monitor it closely. Later that evening, as they stood overlooking the recovering fields, Juno turned to Michael, her expression troubled. "I don't understand why you used force against Thuron and the others. It creates more division." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't want to hurt them, Juno, but I had to stop them. They were destroying the seeds, condemning everyone to starvation." "But there are other ways," Juno insisted. "Violence only breeds more violence." Michael met her gaze, his eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I know. Believe me, I know. I've seen too much of it. That's something I carried with me from my time in the military. I never wanted to repeat those events here on this planet. That's why I didn't kill them. That's why I just subdued them." Suddenly, a Voxari scientist rushed towards them, his face pale with alarm. "Counselor, we have a problem. New readings show a dangerous mineral is leaching into the soil. From the mountains." The acrid smell of mineral dust still clung to the air, a faint reminder of the crisis that had gripped the Voxari colony. Michael and Juno followed the trickle of contaminated water upstream, the red soil staining their boots. It led them to the base of the mountain range, where a spring gurgled weakly from the rocks. The readings on Juno's scanner confirmed their suspicions. "The source," she stated grimly, "an underground spring. The recent tremors must have cracked the rock, releasing the mineral deposits." Michael knelt, examining the flow. "We can't just let it keep flowing like this. It'll poison everything downstream." He stood, his gaze distant, calculating. "I've built field-expedient filtration systems with less." Juno raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Filtration? With what resources?" Michael grinned, a spark of his old soldier days flickering in his eyes. "Remember that engineering course they made us take? Turns out it wasn't a complete waste of time." Juno, ever the scientist, had been studying the native flora. There is a plant, the silt stalker, that thrives in mineral-rich environments. It absorbs the excess mineral. It could act as a natural filter if we can cultivate enough of it. Days blurred into a frenzy of activity. Michael, with his practical know-how, designed the filtration system. It was a series of interconnected pools and channels, diverting the spring water through layers of gravel and sand. Juno, meanwhile, coordinated the Voxari farmers, transplanting silt stalkers into the pools. Their prosthetic limb whirred softly as they worked, a symbol of her own resilience and willpower. The moment they diverted, the flow was tense. The contaminated water gurgled into the first pool, swirling around the roots of the silt stalkers. For hours they waited, monitoring the water as it flowed through the system. Finally, Juno's scanner beeped. "The mineral content, it's decreasing." The system is working, but the silt stalkers did more than just filter. Thriving in the mineral-rich water, they grew exponentially, their leaves turning a vibrant emerald green. Juno ran further tests. Incredible! The plants are synthesizing the mineral into a potent fertilizer if we compost the leaves back into the soil. The results were undeniable. The earth crops, nourished by the silt stalker compost, exploded with growth. Where once the soil was barren and lifeless, now vibrant green shoots reach for the sky. The Voxari colony witnessed the transformation, their faces etched with awe and hope. Even the most skeptical among them couldn't deny the evidence before their eyes. With the immediate crisis averted, Michael and Juno turned their attention to the underlying tensions within the colony. They called a community meeting, gathering the farmers, the scientists, and even the members of the rival faction. The air was thick with apprehension. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "I came here to share seeds, to help you survive. I'm not here to change your way of life. I've seen firsthand the ingenuity and resilience of the Voxari people. I believe that by combining our knowledge, we can create a sustainable future for this colony." Juno stood beside him, her voice resonating with authority. "We have been a divided people for too long. Fear and distrust have blinded us to the opportunities that lie before us. Michael has shown us that collaboration is not a weakness but a strength. We must embrace the knowledge of others while preserving the traditions that make us who we are." The leader of the rival faction, a grizzled Voxari elder named Vorak, stepped forward, his head bowed. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice filled with remorse. "I feared that your ways would corrupt ours. But I see now that you have only sought to help us. I apologize for my actions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A new council was formed, representing all factions within the colony. Their mandate was simple: to ensure the long-term sustainability of the farming system and to prevent the mistakes of the past from ever being repeated. As the meeting adjourned, Michael felt a sense of profound satisfaction. He had come to the Voxari colony seeking to make a small difference. He had found something far greater, a purpose, a community, a family. Juno turned to him, a warm smile gracing her lips. "What will you do now, Michael?" He looked out over the thriving fields, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the Voxari farmers. "I think I'll stay a while. There's still a lot of work to be done." Weeks later, Michael and Juno walked through the fields, the golden stalks of wheat swaying gently in the breeze. The air was filled with the sweet scent of ripening grain. "We did it, Juno," Michael said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," she agreed, her voice filled with pride. "And we will continue to do so, together." She stopped, turning to face him. "I have something for you." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a farming tool crafted from polished Voxari wood and shimmering metal. It was a traditional planting stick, used for generations by Voxari farmers. "A symbol," she explained, "of our partnership, of our shared future." Michael took the tool, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings. "Thank you, Juno, it's beautiful." He looked at her, his heart overflowing with gratitude and affection. He had come to this alien world as a farmer, offering his last seeds. He had found a home, a purpose, and a love he never expected. The red dust still swirled in the wind, but now it carried the promise of a new beginning, a testament to the power of human ingenuity, compassion, and the enduring bonds of friendship.